what are going to be his first actions, and what are going to be the drastic changes he makes are things that I don't think we as Kool-Aids outside of the dressing room, outside of dinners, outside of communications will actually see. He actually, I think, said what he was going to do. The first thing he was going to do, he said he wants rules. And so let me get the exact quote here. I think at first it's important that we put rules in place and be more demanding with ourselves. After that, we can talk about values, about respect and attitude, because if we don't have values, we don't have a team. Then we can look at the model, how we play, how we attack, how we defend. It's not about being tough, but having rules. I will try to help the players personally and professionally. I know how taxing it is to psychologically play for this club. So what he might be doing, or what he might do that changes things, is he might be a bit, and a lot of managers do this, especially those that we don't know how hands-on he likes to be. But there are stories going back to Pep's days about he wanted players to eat a certain thing at a certain time the night before a match, or 3 nights before a match, right? There were certain requests that he would make, just odd requests of players that were very, very regimented. And so Xavi might come in with these kind of rules. I mean, they could make a lot of sense. Like maybe Xavi really, really believes in, mangoes or whatever, right? So, or avocados. And he says, hey, I really trust that I want what I did at El Sad, and what I want players to do is eat. We have an avocado snack at 8 p.m. every night before a match, and we all get on a Zoom call, and we all say one thing, a positive affirmation the next day, right? Like I'm not saying that's sort of a success, but I'm saying is like he might actually bring in, that's what he might even mean by rules, where he's going to say, hey, I know that Koeman allowed you to get on the bus at X time, but I actually want to stay in the locker room until X time and get on the bus at a different time, right? Like I just like Xavi is going to put it in his model, his mold. And there's so many little moments, little minutes, XYZ that we don't see because obviously we're outside the club. So those things all behind the scenes, and even the way that they go about communication. And I think that's, again, going to be the biggest change, or the biggest drastic thing that's going to be different, is Koeman had a certain way of not really talking to people. I mean, it started with Luis Suarez and their 2-minute phone call about Luis Suarez, the 3rd leading goal scorer in club history, exiting the club. And
telling him goodbye. Basically.
35-second conversation, all the way up to like Puig kind of getting mixed signals sometimes. And even in the signal he did get, having the ability to refuse that, right? So for Xavi, I think it's going to be, there's no reason, as you said, he's been completely emboldened. There's no reason for him not to have full transparency on the conversations he has with his players moving forward, because he does have the power to do so, and he does have the backing of the president. So I just think, again, we will not physically see those big changes, but hey, those big changes could mean immediate results, and it might not mean any tactical changes. It literally just might mean that the team that was up 3-0 holds on to a 3-1 lead, and that might be the only difference, but it might be a very similar team who winds up, again, getting a few results, and you're going to feel like everything is different. But no, it's just the team is a bit more emboldened because of what they call, that new manager bump.
Exactly.
But
I think there's a new manager bounce with a certain element of, and I think you touched on it. There's that almost unparalleled level of institutional knowledge of, I mean, he said it in his own statement that I know the toll, what did he say? The psychological toll or the emotional toll that playing for this club can take. And there are, I don't know, I mean, how many, there's maybe a small handful of people on earth that can walk in and tell a young player who either has signed here or, has just graduated from La Masia what it is, just once the heat gets ratcheted up, and once you're not a kind of a young starlet and a hopeful, a little bit of a hopeful novelty, once they're really demanding things of you, here's how that goes. And here's how you actually approach your job to deliver on those expectations.
Yeah. I mean, remember, a very young Xavi was booed, was jeered, was at the Camp Nou. And he was very close to leaving, going to, I believe it was Rangers at the time in like 2003, I want to say, or 2000, maybe even 2002. But yeah, I mean, he was close to, after having made his debut, thinking he was the next young thing. He was going to be the next young thing, Pep Guardiola under his wing. And yet he's getting jeered and is on the peripheral of the club. And yet he was able to stick around and wound up to catch iron at the perfect time.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I actually had a conversation with someone here about this recently. I think a little bit of and we actually, that period. So when Xavi made his debut, so that was, I guess, that was the end of the sort of the ill-fated second Van Gaal era, I believe, because he
Yeah.
gave
He
both.
kind of got his debut in what, 98, I think it was 97 or 98 is when he first made his debut. And then he really
Yeah,
kind of featured in the club between 99 and 2001-ish, around that area.
yeah. And then, yeah, and then, but that was, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was when Van Gaal came back, and
Mhm.
but because it was Van Gaal, but pre Rijkaard, so
Right.
it was kind of, yeah. And he's seen this, he's seen Barca in the rocky times when
Go German.
the wins aren't coming and the fans are upset.
Yep. So yeah, speaking of changes, Pancho asked
Yep.
the question: do you think Xavi will finally bench some of the old guard? Also, what are your biggest takeaways from his appointment? Well, let's do the first one. I think it's going to be a lot less complicated than we think it is. I think he's just going to
Mm,
rotate them better.
yeah.
Busquets, I looked this up. I mean, I knew Busquets was playing too much, and, indeed
Mm,
he is. Busquets has played the full 90 in all but 4 matches this season. All
that's
three of
yeah.
Yeah, all three of the four coming in September, and three of those 4 matches being terrible matches: the Bayern, the Benfica, and the Granada. And then he also played 83 minutes in August in the 4-2 win against Real Sociedad. So he came off once in victory or once in success, like you've done your job.
Yeah.
And the other three he came off because, okay, Barca are done. I mean, they're done and dusted. Let's just to take
I
our
might as well save his legs a bit. Yeah.
so but he's played in all 90 matches and all those other ones. So an entire month straight of playing the full 90. So, I mean, Xavi said that it's an advantage to have a relationship with PK, Busquets, Alba, Roberto, and even Ter Stegen. So I think that's going to be important. It's not even Busquets,
Yeah.
oh, you're the captain, like you have to take a seat or you're going to be benched for De Jong. No, Busquets is just not going to play the full 90 all the time, which is totally
Yeah.
fine. And he might actually, oh my gosh, come off the bench as a sub occasionally. Not to say that he'll be a sub, but like, I mean, how different is it going to be if he's just only playing the full 90 twice a week instead of 3 times a week, right? It's like, it's not
Yeah.
that crazy. And then Roberto, I think, is the one that he is a captain. Roberto might find himself on the peripheral. He's the one player that I'm like, oh, even when he comes back from injury, he may play only every other match or every third match.
Yeah,
But
I
I
think
think,
he's more of a utility guy and just sort
yeah,
of, the yeah, used in necessity, or when someone needs a break, someone needs a rest, or yeah, because he's at the very least he understands what it is he's supposed to be doing, whether it comes off as a different question. But yeah, I mean, I think you can kind of put him in as an old head, but yeah, I don't imagine we'll see too much of him, as a regular starter, kind of a true kind of rotation player going forward.
well, I think that right back spot in particular, if we speak about not Roberto as a right back, but
Mm-hmm.
midfield or right back, like even just because a player comes to the academy, you had mentioned Puig, doesn't mean that Xavi is immediately going to fall in love with them or think that they're
Mm-hmm.
the greatest player who needs to be on the field. I mean, he's going to have a list of tasks that he wants each position to do. So a player
Yeah,
like Oscar Mingueza at right back and Dest very different, right? They're
yeah,
so different of players, and they're both very flawed. They both do good things, but they're both very
yeah.
flawed. So the question is from the jump, which of those two players at right back has a natural skill set that better aligns with Xavi's vision? That player
Mm-hmm.
might be the one who gets the first opportunity. And let's say Mingueza, not only does he not really fit exactly what Xavi wants in that position, but he also can't really get to that level. Like he's not exactly doing in training what Xavi's asking of him.
Yeah,
I mean, Gaither could easily find himself on the outside looking in the same way that
yeah.
Balde. Oh, Balde deserves time. He's a young up and comer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if Xavi wants a certain thing out of Balde, out of that player, and he's not
Mm-hmm.
really delivering that in training, you're like, oh, what happened to Balde? He fell out of favor with Xavi. Well, no, he's 17 and he's going to need some time to get up to
Yeah.
speed. And so Xavi's not going to trust him in those opportunities. Instead, it's going to be, Roberto out of position at left back because Xavi
Mm-hmm.
feels like he could do the job he's asking of him better. And the truth is a result. Let's say Balde finds himself back with Barca B and Roberto
Mm-hmm.
plays more and Barca go on a 5-game winning streak, right? It's not that it was all on Balde. It's that
Right.
Roberto better does the job that Xavi was asking and Barca's results are improving with that. So, as far as the old guard goes, I think it may be a bit more rotation, but it also might not change at all. And it might be things that we don't really see depending on what he's asking of them. But
Yeah.
at some point though, I mean, not to contradict myself
Mm,
quickly before I let you go, between PK and Busquets and even Alba and Roberto, their physical limitations and the flaws that they have due to their experience, we should say,
yeah.
aren't going to go away. It's a lot harder for those kind of players to get that new manager bump than a young player who can immediately take instruction, internalize it, and use that as motivation and passion. These older players, it's a bit harder. Even if they want to do the thing, their body might not even allow them to play for their friend.
Well, I think that's the biggest part of it is, speaking about the old guard first. Yeah, I mean, particularly, it's particularly true of PK and Busquets and Alba as well. And I've never been a huge fan of just simply piling on Sergio Roberto, but to a somewhat lesser extent, Sergio Roberto. But anyway, to varying degrees, all four of these guys we've seen in the past. They know what the job is. They know the sort of that Barca way of playing. They've tasted success at this club, and they've done some great things. I mean, there's a lot of mileage on all of those legs, and particularly when it comes to Piqué and Busquets. When you were talking about Busquets and maybe him coming off of the bench sometimes, or definitely not being slated to play the full 90 every week, just clockwork. Honestly, that makes a lot of sense. It's nothing against the player he's been or the incredible just savvy and even to this point talent that he still possesses. But I mean, there come points where we realize that we're closer to the end than we are at the beginning. And I don't know that there is a scenario in which playing Busquets 90 minutes every time out, unless it's out of just sheer necessity. I don't know that is what needs to be happening. And so in that sense, I imagine all four of the old guard, I imagine they'll get fewer minutes. At the same time, I don't imagine anyone's going to be completely sort of frozen out or, immediately Xavi's just going to come and,
Luke de Jong. That's the one.
What's that?
Except maybe Luke de Jong.
Oh yeah, no, I'm talking about the Barca old guard. Yeah, no. I don't foresee a great deal of Luke de Jong going forward, and that's not the worst thing. But no, but I think the sort of that core four that's still around. I imagine they'll get fewer minutes, but I think there's also an element of, again, these guys have so much institutional knowledge. They understand what the Barca way of playing is. And I don't mean the Barca way, and just even simply on the pitch, these guys understand what it looks like when it works, what goes into it when it works. And so I think in a sense, Xavi can look at these guys as extensions of him within the playing squad. And so I don't think there's going to be a case of any high profile casualties from the squad, but I imagine we will see lighter minutes loads for each of these guys.
Yeah. I mean,
and so, I mean, and that kind of dovetails in with, I don't want to say auditioning, but effectively figuring out, a little bit of experimentation with the young guys to figure out, okay, we can take as read that every one of these guys has talent. They are a talented player to a certain extent. They are objectively pretty good players or good prospects. Sometimes a good prospect just simply doesn't do, it's exactly what you said. Sometimes a good prospect simply doesn't do the thing that you need him to do. That doesn't make him a bad player, but it's worth, these are the times when the stakes, relatively speaking, are lower, to figure out what is going to be, who are your foundational pieces going forward, and who can really learn from the old guard and almost maybe try to develop into the sort of organically develop into the natural replacements for them.